All right, let's roll. So, in today's video, I'm going to be talking about a little bit different of a topic than what I've been discussing on this channel. As of recent, I've been talking about working out, lifting, routine, how to be tough. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about a more worldwide crisis, you could say, a pandemic of suburbanization, the pandemic of the death of aesthetics in everyday life. So it's kind of interesting. Maybe this is something that you thought about sort of in passing, but not necessarily took real deep time to think about. Well, I did that for you. So, thank me later. But aesthetics in everyday life, you think about beautiful buildings. I don't know, the Big Ben. That's what it's called, right? I don't know. The Eiffel Tower. Think about a city square in the heart of Switzerland. What comes to mind, right? Aesthetics, beauty, great architecture, all that John. Well, it doesn't really exist anymore in everyday life, especially here in North America, in America, really. And that's because we're a post-industrial revolution society, right? We came about after the Industrial Revolution began, so we don't really have much going for us in terms of aesthetics. Buildings and structures that were built after the Industrial Revolution, a lot of them are very utilitarian in nature, meaning that it's purely for producing the most goods, purely for the most utility, right? It's within the name. And I think most of us can agree that a lot of those buildings are boring. And I think this really has to do not with urbanization and people moving into the big city, because it's always kind of been a phenomenon within societies for as long as you can remember. The reason the city is big, the reason it's impactful is because there's a lot of people in it most of the time, right? That's barring exceptions to the rule. So in today's video, my goal is to kind of explore this and explore the issue that this creates. So first of all, get into utilitarian architecture. You think about you're driving by, you're chilling, right? Maybe you're on a highway and you see one of those buildings kind of connected to the highway, like they're an offshoot of the highway. They're very boxy, they're very corporate, right? A lot of times they're factories or plants or office spaces, and they don't necessarily really lift the soul that much. They're kind of depressing, right? Maybe it's just like straight windows, it's a box with a bunch of windows from what you see, at least on the outside. And when you go inside, a lot of these corporate regions, they're not any better. Sterile carpeting, right? It's like gray carpet, maybe a little coffee, bar or whatever you call it. I don't know. Coffee space. I'm blanking on that. Maybe a little bit of, a coffee hour area. Yeah, to the side. And you go into these offices, it's just like a computer, and it's just like, that's just it, right? It doesn't really actually lift the soul. It doesn't do much for you mentally. In fact, it can be kind of depressing, right? It's very corporate, it's very dry, and it can be very depressing, right? I think it's very unnatural too. You think about nature, and these kind of completely go against what's just in nature, right? Because you got to think nature and the earth, and I don't mean like the actual planet, more of a figurative term for nature, is what humans were designed to live in and admire and, all that. And it honestly makes you just depressed, right? I can remember there's this one workplace, it's like an office space that I would drive by, well, that I would go by if we were driving somewhere when I was like 5. And we still do. But I remember being younger and we would drive by there. It was on like a little bridge, right? And this was like usually you go there for us, like to go to the movie theater or Home Depot, like just based on where we live. And so there would be this office space off to the right. And I always remember looking at it and kind of just thinking like, wow, like that's just kind of bland. Like that obviously I wasn't saying that in my mind. I don't even know what I think I didn't think I knew what bland meant at the time. But that was kind of my general thought process about it. Right. And this isn't anything like I'm not saying I was some kind of golden child who understood, oh my gosh, utilitarian architecture's making society so depressed and it's worsening our mental health and it's something that we don't think about in our everyday lives. That's not what I was thinking, right? Like word for word, but it was just like, dang, it's kind of buns, bro, right? And I think a lot of y'all can probably recall this when you were younger too, especially if you grew up in a suburban or rather urban area like me, where it's just kind of like everything's so boring, right? What really is there to offer, especially in suburban areas? I think urban areas sometimes have, John to offer. I live very close to Detroit, and I know Detroit gets a bad reputation, but there's cool buildings here and there. MGM Grand, you get the sports fields. There's nice cathedrals and stuff too. And yeah, there's a lot of BS that comes with it. But in suburban areas, it's purely most of the time just sterile buildings. Even the housing now is just kind of like there's not much beauty to it. It lacks aesthetics. And aesthetics are something that we sort of undervalue heavily in today's world. Right? You got to think about like a European city square, right? Think about Central Europe, the Netherlands, for example. The Dutch Empire, the best empire ever. I say that with bias. I'm a little Dutch boy, right? But it's true. We were goaded. But think about like Amsterdam, right? Beautiful. Obviously, it's still got its bad parts. But think about Amsterdam 200 years ago. It must have been so beautiful, must have been so uplifting and inspiring. And that was most cities, right? You were either in the city for like, for example, Amsterdam in the Netherlands, or you were out in the countryside and you had a dang windmill on your farm, right? And that in and of itself is very inspiring. And it's sort of food for the soul when you think about it. You think about just how uplifting that might be. And, even for me, one thing I can remember when I was a little bit younger, I haven't gone there in a while, but I was in Miami one time on a vacation as a little jit with the family. We were down there because my dad, he had like a business trip or something down there where he could take us. So we were down there for like a week, and it was so nice, even that, because you would see the palm trees, you would see nice buildings alongside that. Some buildings, a lot of it's corporate, whatever, but some of those buildings had creativity. Some of those buildings gave you a spark, especially when you go down to like Brickell or something like that, which I know kind of now is a complete like butthole, but this was like 7 years ago. I think post COVID, Miami is really kind of, it's terrible now, but this might have been like 7, 8 years ago. Right. I was just a youngin', but I remember really liking it because you had like cool restaurant designs, you had all this, and there was something to that, right? And I can only imagine, I've seen pictures of like what a European city square would look like. So beautiful. so inspiring. And like I said, you were either there or you were in the countryside, which in and of itself, I think most would say and agree that that is a very beautiful, nice thing as well. And we're kind of missing that now. I think a big reason why we are is because of suburbanization in the suburbs, right? You think about the Levitt towns, William Levitt and company, building all these suburbs in America in the 50s, post World War II. The baby boom's going on. A lot of kids are being born. America's population is skyrocketing. All these dudes, and I guess these women too. I don't know why I'm just excluding the dudes. They're having a lot of kids, right? Big families. So Will Levitt, the GOAT, had a great, great business idea. Let's build these little homes, right? Relatively little, like a mansion. Let's just build these homes for people to live in, right? And let's sell them. Let's build these big strips of housing, and the middle class will eat this stuff up, right? And it's a good idea. It definitely is. And it worked because the suburbs completely exploded in popularity. I mean, people are just moving to the burbs left and right. It's the new trend. And the suburbs used to be pretty actually cool, I think. Right? Like I remember learning about in US history this year, they would have like pools in most suburbs. Like they would have like a local, like a neighborhood pool you would go to. There might be a little concession. Imagine like summertime, the whole hood pulls up and it's just one big ball, one big bash in the hood. You're eating your hot dog, you're swimming, you're getting, you're chatting up with the chicks in the neighborhood, all that. That's very nice in a way. Now it's just kind of like your average suburban neighborhood is all kind of disconnected, right? You think about it now, a lot of people don't even have kids in these neighborhoods, which isn't a big deal, obviously. It's not their fault, right? Like if I'm 20 and I'm living in a house in the suburbs, it's not my fault I don't have kids. But it's like a reality that we're kind of facing where it's like, man, in my entire neighborhood, there might be like 15, 20 kids, let alone kids that are my age or kids that are actually cool and are tough like me, right? I mean, I can only think of like two that are even remotely goated. Just saying. Now, for my best friend in like elementary, or one of my best friends is my neighbor, but like that's not necessarily normal though. It happens sometimes, but like your next door neighbor being your best friend, even in like elementary or early elementary, isn't normal now. But back in the day, that was normal. You think about the village of the medieval times, that was normal. And, to have your friends, most of your friend group just within that village, y'all are just chilling, chatting, you know, 13-year-old you and your homeboys sneaking into the tavern on a Friday night, getting lit, and then you got to sober up because you got to go confession for, in the Catholic church the next day, the local church. And you got to tell the priest, oh man, you know, I did it, Father. That was cool. That was good to have, right? Those communities that were very localized and regionalized. And I don't want to say isolated because that sounds bad, but in a way, isolated. It was honestly good. Holy crap. My bad. I'm peeping the breaking news here on my computer. I'll have to look at it later. It says like at least 20 dead. I don't know in what. Hopefully it's not anything bad. Jeez. Um, yeah, I think the highway kind of killed that alongside the suburbs because the suburbs, they make you, you have to commute now to the city. all this, right? You're dependent on cars. It's nothing's walkable anymore. Um, and the highway kind of moved that forward and pushed the envelope a lot more alongside that. And so everything now is not really based in the suburbs. Of course, you can walk and work in places in the suburbs, but you got to think as a grown man, odds are you're going to be working somewhere in the city, right? Somewhere corporate. Or even if you're a labor bro, your headquarters probably is going to be in like a city, an you city, you know, even if you're a trade bro. Not a lot of places based in the suburbs. There are some, not a lot of big ones, especially if like you're a union bro. Forget the burbs. I mean, come on, you know? So that's really what it comes down to is that the highway and this whole pushing the envelope of like how far we can travel with ease has killed community in a big way. Because now, we're just driving around. You gotta drive everywhere to just meet up with your homeboy. My friends, though my best friends, one of them lives about 30 minutes away, one lives like 45 minutes away. It's like, dang, you know? So to see them, it's a big deal. Back in the day, if I was a a serf in the 1400s, my homeboys would just be like, you'd be posting up to work with them, getting the crops, toiling, and you go out to the tavern, have a drink, and maybe hit on the broad, bringing you like your ale, your beer. It's always that's good to have, right? We don't want everything to be so commercialized and so sterile and so isolated. It's really becoming a bigger problem and a bigger issue as time goes on. And I think it really was driven by the suburbs and the invention of the highway, which, don't get me wrong, have had their benefits. I think the highway is great if you have family that lives afar. You can just hit the road and pull up and see them within just a few hours, right? You don't have to take the train, even though that'd probably be nice. I think that'd be pretty cool to do. It's kind of tough, right? But like, still, there's benefits to it. The suburbs, like I said, it is sort of, back in the day, it was very communal, very community oriented and based because most people who lived in the suburbs, it was families, right? So you have your best friends within the burbs. But now it's like a lot of people who live in the suburbs are like, they're old, right? They should just be in their apartment, right? What are they doing out here? Of course, like I said, it's not their fault. And I mean, of course, I would rather live in a house than like an apartment, but still, come on, So that's just also because a lot of actually, the biggest generation right now, population wise, are the boomers, right? So now they're all very old. And so most people are just old when you really think about it. And, or people are just single. They're not having kids. They're married. No kids. They're dinks. Dual income, no kids. I think that's the abbreviation. Kind of unfortunate, right? Kind of sad. What happened to great architecture? What happened to great aesthetics? What happened to the community, that we once so proudly had and beauty? It was great. It was beautiful. Kind of depressing, right? Kind of gets you down. Well, there's a plus side. There's always a positive no you can leave on. First of all, be grateful for what you have. It's so generic, it's so cliche, but it's true. Like I said, the suburbs, the highway, there's benefits to it. Take advantage of it. going out and about to nice cities on a frequent, if possible. Like I said, we have a downtown area about like a 20-minute bike ride away from me. I'll post up there on a frequent, especially during the school year, to hang out, right? That, it's downtown Plymouth or whatever. Got a lot of old buildings. It does a lot of old churches, right? It's got this very cozy, homey feel to it. That's really nice to have. Like I said, it's sort of passive inspiration in a way. You probably have a place like that near you. Pull up there, right? I love to pull up to the library. It's a beautiful library. It's got like this, it's just great. It's just great. You go in there, you get a good book. Maybe you go out to the little coffee shop, the antique store. That's really nice to have because it's an old city, right? It was obviously post-industrial revolution because it's in America, right? In Michigan. So, of course, but at the same time, like it's not completely corporate. It's really nice, you know. So you want to have that. You want to have those things, those areas that you can go to, and they'll be actually kind of inspiring in a way. And they're nice. They're aesthetic. They're beautiful. You can admire from afar. If you had the opportunity, I would very much move to one of these places. The countryside, the rural regions, especially like a mountainy area. Ooh, ooh, I could go for that. Don't even get me started. Or like a city area that's not super urban, but that's kind of stuck in the days of old. Really nice to have. Another thing too is to admire old art. This is kind of a more niche concept, but even I have a calendar. I don't know, maybe. There we go. So those are Claude Monet's paintings. He was an impressionist artist in the 1800s, and he was a dog. I love his art. He's my favorite painter ever by a mile. I think his paintings are so cool. And so every month it's a different painting. Even that, I have a lot of other stuff too, but like that's really nice. You can kind of admire this. For the month of July, I don't actually know which painting this one is. I don't know if it says it does, but it's backwards. It's a little girl in like a sunflower field, a little house behind, the sun's glaring down, and it gives you that July vibe. People miss this stuff. Aesthetics dying can also be the death of a society in a figurative way, and perhaps if it gets really bad in a literal way. But there's always a hope. Hopefully, you guys got some food for thought from this video. And as always, God bless.